welcome back to the show. I'm here with Christian Taylor.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Phil.
Hi, is that salmon?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Pretty in Salmon. And
Salmon.
Sky Jatani.
Hi.
Pretty in Gray.
Stripes. I have stripes.
You are striped today.
I have, just like the wall behind you there.
You know who you remind
and
me
you're
of?
wearing a collar.
I am wearing a collar.
Yeah.
You remind me of the zebra in...
Madagascar?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Wouldn't that just apply to any
That's
zebra,
Chris
though?
Rock.
I know. He's funny.
Is he reminding you of Chris Rock?
No, the zebra. He's reminding me of the zebra.
You have Chris Rock energy.
You do.
It's just like, wah, you're always on. Ah.
Right.
It's funny, though, that you thought about Madagascar when all I said was the zebra. That's pretty... I guess
How
we're
many
mind-melding.
celebrity zebras are there?
Did you see Racing Stripes? the
Yeah,
movie
Racing Stripes.
Racing
That was
Stripes?
terrible.
What was that zebra's name? Did that zebra have a name?
He was Racing Stripes.
Was his name?
Stripes? I think it was Stripes.
Stripes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they had the Talking Flies, one of which
that-
may have been Chris Rock.
Yeah, it probably
I think
was.
So.
Yeah.
Wow, so Chris Rock is related to all celebrity zebras.
6 degrees of
Chris
Chris
Rock zebra.
zebras, yeah.
The tangents we go on this podcast.
I know. I got to sing a theme song, and
Sing
last
it.
week I did it as a duet between... Who did I do it as a duet between last week?
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So this week, Matthew says, hey, since you did a Mr. Nezer, Mr. Lunt duet on the last podcast, I was wondering if you could do a duet for the theme song with Buck Denver and Bob the Tomato.
Wow.
Oh.
Now, that's interesting because that's technically crossing the streams, which you're never supposed to do on Ghostbusters. But this isn't Ghostbusters, so I think I could probably do
All right.
it. We'll see how
Let's
it
see how
goes.
you do it.
Okay. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know?
Hey, it's a podcast, and we got video.
Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear.
The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
We'll talk to Sky.
Hey, Buck.
Hi, Sky. And Christian, too.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, you're so salmon today.
Does God love me
He
anyway?
made you very special, and he salmons you very much.
And we got no guest here. No, not one for you.
Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear.
The Phil Vischer podcast
Starts right here.
The Phil Vischer podcast.
Starts right here.
Okay.
That was fun.
That was tremendously fun. Bob the Tomato is my Mr. Rogers. I think I've said that
Yes,
before. He's
you
my
have.
inner Mr. Rogers. And that's kind of that's what set up the whole show originally, VeggieTales, was the sense that Bob the Tomato wanted to be a preschool TV host, but that it goes horribly. So it was a parody, almost a parody of a preschool.
Kind of like Buckwheat from SNL. Remember that?
Wait.
How does that...
When Eddie Murphy did the Mr. Rogers thing, wasn't?
Yeah,
No, that was Mr.
no.
Robinson.
Yeah, he did Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Robinson. I'm getting his characters confused.
That was a
Sorry.
parody.
That was a
Yes.
parody, but not a tomato parody.
No, and it wasn't really an homage either, because it was more just,
Making fun of him.
well, it was cultural commentary.
Yes, it was.
Buckwheat. I thought about trying to do the theme song as Buckwheat.
That would be offensive.
Yeah, but I think it'd probably be offensive.
Probably.
But
Like we've said many times,
it'd be
Phil,
fun.
Stay away from racial stereotypes.
well, all my characters are racial stereotypes.
So you
How
just-
do I
you
stay?
just
It's
stay
like
away
staying
from-
away from myself.
I don't think there's racial stereotypes so much as
Well,
I just think they're
dialects.
They're dialects. That's
They're
different.
dialects combined with different vocal tones.
Right,
what
which
my
is not a
characters are.
stereotype. Is you're saying they're like doing that behavior that.
No, it's not about behavior.
Right.
It's just about the tone.
So it's not a
the sound.
stereotype. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Whatever.
So
Just an accent.
Someone's offended somewhere.
yeah, someone is always offended somewhere. So Mark Driscoll had an off week, would you say?
Off week?
What
Yeah.
happened?
He resigned. He officially resigned from
Really?
his church.
He'll be back.
Mars Hill. How would he be back?
I don't know
What
if
would
he'll
he be back
I don't
as?
know if he'll be back at Mars Hill, but he'll be back.
He's not very old, right? He's
No.
like our age, my
Well, he's younger
age.
than you, older
He's
than
younger
me.
than me, older than you.
I think he's about 40,
Okay.
42 maybe.
Yeah, so he was 20 years at the church, right? And he started when he was
I
like
don't remember.
24.
I don't
So
know.
he's about.
Well, was there a big cataclysmic occurrence, or
Well,
was it
he
just
had
all
to-
these things added up?
He took time off to sort things out and do some work, and then decided he couldn't come back, that it was just too controversial at this point. So,
But I think he made it clear in his resignation letter that he is choosing to do this, and that
Yeah.
there's nothing that's happened that would disqualify him from ministry in the future.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I think that's an indication that he's probably going to hang
What's
low for a little bit and then
What's
come
the
back.
message for other pastors, do you think? If you were an editor at an evangelical Christian magazine for Christian leadership, how would you summarize? And you sang the What Have We Learned song.
Well, there's a whole other story there. My title has changed at CT, so I'm no longer officially the executive editor of Leadership Journal.
Okay.
But
Well, what are you?
I am the director for mission advancement, I believe is my title.
What
now.
does that mean?
They switch my offices every couple months. They give me a different title. You know, it's just what happens.
Okay. So the answer to Phil's question would be
Picture yourself.
There are a lot of lessons to be taken from what happened to Mr. Driscoll.
But that you think is specific to this case and couldn't be applied to any flame out of any Christian leader.
I don't think there's anything terribly unique.
Got nothing.
Well, I
nothing.
think the big one is, okay, there was no catastrophic moment of sexual immorality
Right.
or
There was
financial
no major
embezzlement.
moral failure.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
He was a bully.
I would say
That's the
that
contention.
nobody gets an exemption from the fruit of the Spirit.
Oh, okay.
That's an interesting way to put it.
And particularly when you are the spiritual leader of a community, you should have some level of maturity and evidence of the fruit of the Spirit, and I think that caught up with him.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind,
Yeah.
church leaders, and I've
Yeah.
said this before, and
When we're talking to you, church leaders.
people get uncomfortable when I say this, but I think it's an important reminder, and that is that truth, doctrinal truth, is not one of the fruits of the Spirit. So you can have somebody who may well be teaching doctrinal truth, but it doesn't mean
so
that
you're
they
saying
therefore
that
get a
the
pass.
Spirit does not provide an individual with doctrine.
I'm saying that somebody can be outside of Christ and
Yeah.
still hold doctrinal truths, but not actually be filled with the Spirit. So a lot of people I've
So are
heard.
you actually going on the record saying Mark Driscoll
No,
is
not at
filled
all.
with the
Not at all.
Spirit?
What I'm trying to say is some people get very enamored with Bible teachers or church leaders who are very
Doctrinally sound.
dynamic teachers or
Yeah.
doctrinally sound. And they go, well, he's teaching the truth. He's teaching the truth. He's teaching.
Right.
Fine, he may well be teaching the truth, but if there's no evidence or very little evidence of fruit of the Spirit, is that a leader you really want to be following?
Right.
So I don't think just doctrinal truth alone is a good enough reason to give somebody a position of authority.
Well, that absolutely matches up with what was happening in the New Testament way back when, because the Pharisees would be those ones that had the doctrinal truth, but yet, were not.
Right.
Yeah,
filled
and
with
James brings this up when he says, you believe that there's one God? Good. Well, so do the demons. Big deal. So doctrinal truth is important. I'm not trying to diminish truth, but it isn't alone a qualifying factor in being a leader. So, and you can't say, well, he's teaching the truth, therefore give him a pass on the lack of evidence of character and the other fruit of the Spirit. So I think that's the big lesson for pastors. You may have a successful, quote unquote, successful ministry, meaning buildings, budgets, attendance. You may have taught truth, but if the fruit of the Spirit's not there,
Well, I have
there's a
some
big problem.
firsthand experience with the fact that if you start something when you're very young and it takes off and becomes a huge success, you don't have a lot of time to focus on your own development.
That's a very interesting point.
Everything just carries you along, and soon there are so many people depending on you for their livelihood and many people following you around that you just have to kind of pretend like everything's okay. And he started that church when he was 24, right?
well, and that's a
23.
case where the structures of authority and accountability in the church did not serve him well.
Yeah.
Because somebody should have been able to step in and earlier and say, hey,
Right.
you need to carve out a different existence here.
Take a season off.
Yeah, and hopefully that's what this season becomes, where he
Right.
can step back with his family and recalibrate his life and get on the right track. And, I think it would be good if he did enter ministry again, but from a much healthier, more mature, centered place.
Right.
But we'll see.
Do you know the what would Jesus do phrase?
I've heard it.
That trademark has a new owner.
WWJD?
WWJD.
Wait a minute.
The phrase, what would Jesus do?
It was trademarked?
Yeah, it's trademarked.
Who trademarked that?
Originally.
Most recently, and this is the trademark for making films, televisions, or live performances using the trademark, what would Jesus do?
So it's,
Most recently, it was Kimberly Kearney a cast member of a short-lived reality show called I Want to Work for Diddy.
Is that P. Diddy?
I think so.
That was a show?
Yeah, I Want to Work for Diddy.
Oh, my word.
Not
D-I-
Diddley.
D-
Not I Want to Work for Diddley.
Diddy.
I Want to Work for Diddy.
Okay.
Yeah. She doesn't own it anymore. Do you know who owns it now?
Who owns it?
Who bought it from her?
The Burnett's.
Tyler Perry.
What?
Tyler Perry,
Not surprised.
famous for Medea,
Oh, goodness.
Diary of a Mad Black Woman, lots and lots of African American focused, the hardest working man in showbiz, and now actually
I
one
thought
of the,
that was James Brown.
Yeah, but he died. You can't work hard when you're dead, Sky.
true.
Don't let
So
your Indian background sneak up on you.
Did he? Yeah, that's a reference to reincarnation, isn't it?
Thank you.
Okay.
That was pretty quick.
Thank you.
Did Tyler Perry buy that trademark from James Brown's estate also?
No, I bought it for him. I gave it to him as a birthday, as a housewarming
All right.
gift.
So how much? Let me just ask you the elephant in the room question.
Yeah.
How much did he pay for this
Doesn't
trademark?
say. It doesn't
Oh.
say. But it will be interesting to know what he might do with it. What do you think Tyler Perry is going to make that would be called What Would Jesus Do?
But that doesn't apply to fashion jewelry and wristbands.
No, that stuff I think is still untrademarkable. I think anybody can make WWJD bracelets and such.
Really?
My guess is it's going to be something that may make us cringe.
I don't know. Maybe it'll be the best thing ever.
He hasn't done a ton of cringeworthy Christian stuff, has he?
Well, he had no, but most critics cringe at almost everything he's ever done.
Right.
Okay.
His programming is not critically well received.
But it's certainly
It's popular
yeah.
with a specific community.
and it's commercially very successful.
It's commercially very successful. He's one of the highest paid men in Hollywood now.
well,
As
nobody
a result of all of his
nobody
stuff.
ever lost money underestimating the lack of taste in America. So
No.
Good point.
No. Okay. So anyway, there could be a new movie. There could be a TV show.
So keep your eyes open
something.
for the What Would Jesus Do
Yeah, the
movie.
What Would Jesus Do movie. Tyler Perry's What Would Jesus Do? Coming to a theater near you.
What?
They've done that movie twice.
Really?
What? Bill, our editor, has news for us. What Would Jesus Do? There's already a movie?
They did one and they're working on the sequel.
Who did it?
Tyler,
Company.
Tyler Perry or someone else?
I don't think so.
Well, they're going to have a difficulty now.
Well, Bill says there already is a What Would Jesus Do movie,
I'm gonna look
and
it
they're
up.
working on a sequel because the first one was such a big hit. Wow. That's big news. Hillsong Church won't talk about gays.
Why is that?
Okay. They won't talk to gays, or they won't
No,
talk
they won't
about
talk
gays.
about gays. They're in the news this week. Hillsong Church is the biggest church in Australia. And
Oh, wait a minute. Back up the tape.
What?
What would Jesus do? The movie. You know who the star was?
Who?
Kirk Cameron.
John Schneider.
John Schneider.
Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, I know him.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm
I
not kidding
know
you.
him.
I know him. You do know him?
And he was in
Yeah,
Smallville
We hung out.
as Superman's father.
I hung out with
Earth father.
with Luke Duke.
Well, tell us that story while I'm
I was
looking at.
backstage at an award show. We were hanging out, having
You
fun.
hung out with Luke Duke.
Yeah, and I hung out with a Baldwin brother at a different thing.
Where's IMDb?
Oh yeah, I know everybody.
You know everybody?
What are you looking up?
I'm
now?
looking up this movie that I've never heard of. It's got a very Christian cover art.
Hillsong Church won't talk about gays. Did I mention that?
Yeah, but will they
Yeah,
talk
we
about
moved back,
Jesus
though.
and what he would do?
Yeah. Would they?
So they're in New York, and there's now Hillsong New York in New York City.
Okay.
And I guess there are quite a few. It's an artistic church, and so there's quite a few gays attending. And so they've been asked directly, "What's your policy on gays? What's your position on gays?" And they just say, "We're not even going to go
Well,
there."
the pastor there,
not gonna
Carl
go there.
Lent, is that his name? In New
I
York?
don't remember.
He was interviewed on 60 Minutes or something like that, and they asked him the question. He said he's not interested in talking publicly about that because Jesus didn't talk publicly about that.
Yeah.
What do you guys think
So,
about that?
so what would Jesus talk about?
Can we get away with not talking about anything that Jesus did not talk about? Like we just don't have to talk about. He didn't talk about technology usage, so can we avoid that?
He didn't talk about rated R movies.
He didn't talk about abortion. He didn't talk about immigration. He didn't talk about handgun control.
He didn't talk in English.
He didn't talk about English. He didn't wear pants.
You don't know that.
He did.
He probably didn't wear pants.
Do you think you can
Did they even have
Can
pants
you
back
actually
then?
hide behind that? No, they didn't know how to sew crotches. The crotch wasn't invented until
So-
the 4th century.
So,
That's for the next T-shirt, folks.
Little known fact from Phil Vischer.
so what you're saying is you think he's wrong.
I'm not saying any. No. No.
Phil's not prepared to talk about Hillsong Church because Jesus didn't talk about
Jesus did
Hillsong.
not talk about Hillsong Church. I think it's interesting that when you've got a really complex issue that a lot of people are wrestling with, that a major church would just say, you know what? Jesus didn't talk about it. We're not going to talk about it.
But the Bible does talk about it.
They didn't say the Bible doesn't talk
Right.
about it. They said, we don't follow the Bible. We follow Jesus.
They did not say
They
that.
did not say
No, they didn't say that. I'm making that part up. Is it okay to make up things about your Christian brothers that aren't true? Probably not. But Jesus didn't say it
Didn't
wasn't
do that?
not okay.
You're going down a very slippery and dangerous road.
What are you looking up?
I'm looking up, I read some quotes. I'm looking them up.
Okay. Is that a valid defense, do you think? Is that a valid
No, I don't.
rock to hide behind?
Well, I think, see here, look, famed pastor clarifies homosexuality stance after saying he wouldn't reduce the issue to a yes or no answer. Okay, here we go. So the background on Hillsong, it's actually an Australian,
yes, I said
ministry.
that. Biggest church
Right.
in Australia.
and they've branched out and they have global
They have
stuff going on.
franchises.
The latest one's in New York.
Right.
I heard
don't know
that.
if it's the latest, but it's recent. And it's so Brian Houston is the lead of the Hillsong Church.
Yeah.
And he said, quote, I encourage people not to assume a media headline accurately represents what I said at a recent press conference.
Oh.
Nowhere in my answer did I diminish biblical truth or suggest that I or Hillsong Church supported gay marriage.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He goes on to say, my personal view on the subject of homosexuality would line up with most traditionally held Christian views. I believe the writings of Paul are clear on this subject.
Oh, okay. So he is being clear.
He goes on to say, the New York Times, along with other outlets, reported last week that Houston said his church is in, quote, an ongoing conversation, end quote, about gay marriage. He was reported to have said, quote, the world we live in, whether we like it or not, is changing around and about us. The world's changing, and we want to stay relevant as a church. So that's a vexing thing. He went on, it's very easy to reduce what you think about homosexuality to just a public statement, and that would keep a lot of people happy. But we feel at this point that it is an ongoing conversation, that the real issues in people's lives are too important for us just to reduce it down to a yes or no answer in a media outlet.
Oh, so they're not going to say anything basically in a soundbite form.
Right, which actually I respect, that
Yeah.
you're not just reducing to sound bites.
Yeah.
But
So if you go on Larry King or whatever that British guy is that took his chair, what's his name on CNN? British guy.
yeah.
Piers
Morgan, but
Piers
he's
Morgan.
gone now, isn't he, though?
He's probably going to be gone because people don't like him.
Oh.
And that's not good for TV. People want to watch people they
Larry
like.
King is a hard act to follow.
Larry King is a hard pair of suspenders to fill,
It's true.
if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But he pokes a lot of people on those issues. You know, when he gets a pastor on, he pokes them. And so the response would be then just that's not something that we talk about in
Right.
the forum, in this public forum.
So the other guy that is worth noting on this is Carl Lentz. He's the pastor of the New York Hillsong Church. And he was interviewed maybe last summer. And he's 33 years old, young guy. Not that our prior conversation about having large churches as a young man means anything here.
He is a young guy.
Yeah, so I think he was interviewed somewhere. I'm trying to find the exact quote.
What did he say?
I'm looking it up.
What
I'm
did he
looking it
say?
up. It's but he's the one who said something around.
Maybe
I'm
we
not
could
going to
play a musical interlude.
People's commutes are only so long. Sky.
I realize that, but you didn't give me any heads up that this is what we were going to talk about.
Well, I didn't know that you wanted to look up
Okay, all
specific
right.
things
It's
and
coming.
then say what they were.
Here, I'm looking it up at Christianity Today's website.
We want you to have all of this in your brain.
Just spout it out.
Oh, come on now. It's coming. It's coming.
Lentz said,
All right, here it comes. You ready?
I don't talk about no gays.
Okay.
Is that close?
Here it is. I got it.
Okay.
Okay. He said, quote, Jesus was in the thick of an era where homosexuality, just like it is today, was widely prevalent. And I'm still waiting for someone to show me the quote where Jesus addressed it on the record in front of people. You won't find it because he never did.
How prevalent was homosexuality in Jerusalem?
In Judea, like in the
Yeah,
it was very big in
the Roman Empire,
right? In Greece
but it
and
was
Rome.
a Greek and Roman thing, and it was not the same as what we've got today. It was a lot of pederasty.
What in the world does
Pederasty.
that mean?
Men with boys.
Oh,
That was the common homosexuality of the classical world, because a man would take a boy as a student and teach him, and then his payment was. That's the homosexuality of the classical
is that
world.
right?
Yeah. For the most part.
Interesting. Because it doesn't sound like that in Sodom and Gomorrah. It sounds like it was one big
No,
orgy.
that wasn't the classical world. That was the ancient world. Different world.
Oh,
Yeah.
So Carl Lentz went on to say that he does discuss the issue, just not the way people want me to. And he says, we have a lot of gay men and women in our church, and I pray we always will. His wife, Laura, said, it's not our place to tell anyone how they should live. That's their journey. So that was like 6 months ago
Okay.
that interview happened. And now more recently, Ryan Houston came out and he said this
So
thing
they're
about...
clearly having the conversations internally, and they have policies internally. Because it's easy to say, I'm not going to take a position on that until someone comes up and says, hey, I want to be an elder, and by the way, I'm gay.
Or I want you to do my wedding.
I
or
want to do
perform
my wedding.
Right.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm gay. Then suddenly you have to have a point of view.
Right.
You can't hide behind the Jesus didn't
Talk about
talk about it. And more churches, it's going to be interesting over the next 10 years to see you know, how many churches there. Because there's a well-known church in Chicago that's now changed their position, LaSalle Street, you know, to say officially, you know what, we think Paul is talking about something else.
That was the first church that ever turned me down for a job.
Really?
Yeah.
You applied for a job at LaSalle Street?
Well, I was graduating seminary and I was sending out resumes, and it just and I knew some people there, and it had.
So you're still mad? Is that what you're saying?
No, I just remember it for that reason,
Wow.
and I got
What
the
do you know?
rejection letter on my birthday.
well, it's a pretty liberal church.
It's more on the it's on the very liberal side of evangelical.
Yeah.
yeah, but 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't quite as far along as it is
No, it has
now.
a female pastor.
Laura Truax,
That's
who is a friend of mine.
That's unusual.
Philip Yancey went to that church back in
Yeah,
the
that's
day.
where he taught his Sunday school classes that led to his first big book.
The Jesus I
Right.
Never Knew.
The Jesus I Never Knew was a Sunday school class at LaSalle Street Church in Chicago, which is now pro-gay. Don't tell Philip Yancey. Anyway, that's an interesting story, a little bit of
Well,
background
but
for you.
churches in urban centers like New York or Chicago,
They have to wrestle with this
Right.
first.
usually, and
Usually.
they're not going to be allowed to sit it out.
No, they can't. How long can we sit it out in the suburbs? Quite a while, don't you think?
That's the whole
Depends
point
on
of the
what suburbs you're in.
That's the whole point of the suburbs, is to avoid the world.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Can we build churches inside gated communities?
they have.
They do have them.
Really?
Yeah,
Or the church themselves can become a gated community.
that's true too.
And I said gated, not gayed.
Oh, gated.
Yeah.
What story do you have next?
I see what you're saying. Okay, you'll notice that all the stories are kind of short today. It's because it was a slow news week, and you know we had so much fun with John Walton last week. That was a big thing that we did. So we're doing a bunch of
A lot of doctrine last week, a lot of
we had
theology.
we had a lot of doctrine.
This is just a potpourri of.
Do you remember? This is a cafeteria, a buffet podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So a little of this, a little of that, a little leftover green bean casserole from Thanksgiving, which would be this story. Do you remember John Dickson? We had John Dickson on the show.
Yes.
Yeah,
From-
another Australian.
From Australia.
This is like our Australian theme.
I put a
Hey.
Bible onto Bobby. Don't
do that.
John Dickson was here, and he writes in Australia, and he writes some kind of intentionally fun and provocative pieces. And he wrote a reaction to a Australian who's the head of a skeptical society, who's trying to make the point that a growing number of historians are now suggesting that there was never a Jesus, that there was no historical Jesus. And I've heard this in atheist circles too.
So the head of the skeptic group in
Yes.
Australia is saying there is a group of historians.
There's a growing wave of historians.
Okay.
And John Dickson wrote a nice piece on it. He said the inspiration for this piece by, what the guy's name is?
Crispin.
Brian Morris.
Or him, Brian
Crispin?
Morris.
Crispin
I don't know.
Glover? Brian Morris. The inspiration for Morris' piece is the recent publication of Richard Carrier's book, on the historicity of Jesus. Carrier is well known to atheist apologists and Christian apologists alike. The two groups, John says, are often the mirror image of each other. He learned a PhD from a good ancient history department and has since devoted himself to debating evangelical Christians. So his new book is the first of a publication in a peer-reviewed context arguing that Jesus never lived. So Carrier's thesis is that Jesus started out as a celestial figure of religious visions, only to be dressed up in historical garb by the later gospel writers, after which people began to believe he was a real person. Dickson says, this too would be a first, this claim. Scholars are used to the myths of, say, Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. Their legends first appear around 300 BC.
That was my favorite Star Trek.
That was it's my favorite morning drive time radio hosts.
Oh,
Romulus and Remus.
Yeah.
Their legends.
Their mother was a wolf.
First, I know they suckled from a wolf.
Yes, that's the famous statue.
Was she their mother?
She was like a mother.
Weren't they born by gods or something?
Something like that.
And suckled by a wolf?
Right.
Which made them hardy and a little bit hairy?
Right.
Yeah. And on the 5 hills? How many hills is Rome built on?
7.
7 hills?
Isn't it?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's 7.
hills
Don't
of
even
Rome.
look to me because
The
I
hills
have.
of Rome.
I'm
After they suckled
lost.
from the wolf, they founded a city.
Well, that's what those hills are.
Wolf teats?
Yeah. It's just like Greek mythology. They slaughter the wolf, she becomes the ground, all
Really?
that. Yeah. something
Is
like
that's
No,
really the
I'm
story?
totally making that up.
Okay, good. Good. That's not the next T-shirt. Okay, so the legends of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, first appear around 300 BC, 300 or 400 years after the founding of the city. Carrier...
That's going to be very disappointing news to those who worship Romulus and Remus. That it is a late development.
It is a late development. We're sorry for those Romulans.
Right.
And Remusons. Carrier is asking us to think that a similar process of the historization of myth happened to Jesus, but he wants us to believe that it took in about 1/10 of the time. Within a single generation, Christians are meant to have transformed their heavenly Lord into a Galilean Jewish peasant who, according to virtually all specialists today, fits remarkably well with what we know of the customs, beliefs, and aspirations of Galilean peasantry. So there is, of course, a spectrum of historical Jesus studies from hyper-skeptical to hyper-credulous. You see a similar spectrum in climate change discussions, which is kind of interesting because even in my appearance at Peter Boghossian's atheism class, you get these views that are just so set in stone at such extreme positions, and you see the same thing in politics. Views that are set in stone. You take Jon Stewart and Bill O'Reilly, and then
but that's what the media is designed for these days, because there's so much media out there, internet,
polarizing,
right? And the only voices that get a hearing are the ones, the loud, shrill, crazy ones on the extremes,
making the most extreme statements.
Right.
So he's saying that Carrier is on one end of this spectrum. He says the remaining 90% of working scholars couldn't care less about these positions. They aren't trying to debunk Christianity or prove it. They study the figure of Jesus the way historians study Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. And then I like John Dickson for what he does next, because he says, to repeat a challenge I've put out on social media several times before, I will eat a page of my Bible if someone can find me just one full professor of ancient history, classics, or New Testament in an accredited university somewhere in the world who thinks Jesus never lived.
I don't think he's being serious, because one page, anyone could eat one page. Those are very thin. They basically dissolve in your mouth.
You don't think he's being serious about being willing to eat one page?
I think he needs to go for like a whole book of the Bible.
Eat a whole book of the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's being serious that he will eat a page.
Third letter of John.
Like a substance,
one page.
Old Testament book.
Eat an Old Testament book.
An Old Testament book.
That could mess with your digestion.
But because one page, that's like wafer, it'll just dissolve right on your tongue.
Well, it depends on what kind of paper.
What kind of page?
Yeah, but it's
If it was
his
parchment.
Bible. Yeah, it's one of those little.
Because
be
my
tough.
Bible is my iPad, so that would
That'd be really tough.
difficult.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the strongest historical proofs are that Jesus did exist?
Proofs, there are not proofs in the sense of actual proofs, but there are proofs in the sense of arguments
That was a very political answer, right there.
for. You can't prove that Jesus existed.
Right.
But there is support for Jesus existing.
So she's asking what's the strongest
The
support?
strongest extra biblical, I think the single strongest argument for historical Jesus is the Jesus movement that appears in the first century. It's very hard to argue for the appearance of a movement of that size and that veracity that quickly if there was no originator.
Because there would have been, based on what the gospel accounts say or what we see from the rise of the early church, there would have been people alive who could have verified or denied that this person existed.
Right.
Now, if the Christian movement had started in the 3rd century and they were reporting to believe in a 1st century Messiah, then no one would have been alive in the 1st century to say, oh, no, he never really lived.
Right.
So it was and that's what John Dickson brings up in this point, is the Romulus and Remus story took 300-400 years to develop, and then people started believing that mythology. The Christian story started to be believed and followed very, very quickly.
Within 20, 25 years.
Right. So there isn't enough time for something like that to develop and not be shot down by people who could say, no, there was no guy crucified in Jerusalem under these circumstances, that sort of thing.
And then there are some external references.
I was going to say, what are the external documentation?
Josephus refers to him. Some people claim that those references were written back into Josephus if they don't want to believe that an external historian was aware of Jesus. There are a couple others. I have a big book by Craig Blomberg on the historicity of the Gospels. I've mentioned it before. It's like 500 pages long. And he's summarizing 2,500 pages worth of scholarship over the last 20 years.
Wow.
Condensing it into 500 pages. So there's a lot of scholarship about it. There isn't like one magical proof you can go to. You know, the biggest issues are, and this is actually what I talked about in Portland, at Portland State, was the concept of explanatory power. What's the theory that is the best explanation for the data we're looking at? And if you look at the data of the Jesus movement spreading so rapidly out of Jerusalem, you know, in concentric circles, starting at a very early date, what's the most likely explanation for that? And the most likely explanation is not that there was never a Jesus.
Right.
That's just not that likely. So what you see, and you see it in Carrier and his book, where the concept of burden of proof, up until about 100 years ago, people assumed, for the most part, that the Bible was reliable and was saying historical things. And then there's some point, and somebody in one article was trying to figure out when this happened. Suddenly the burden of proof switched. And now, rather than people pointing at atheists saying, come on, prove that there's no God, prove that we've been wrong all these years, suddenly it's now pointing at believers saying, prove that Jesus did exist.
Right.
And he was a historical figure. You know, prove that there is a God.
Well, and that's the argument that incredible claims require incredible evidence.
And what that misses is the notion of who gets to define what's incredible.
Mr. Incredible does.
Of course. Obviously.
Well,
Duh.
but John Dickson's point here is a really important one. Having studied religion, comparative religion, at a secular university, most of my professors were non-Christians, and yet none of them thought Jesus didn't exist. So even non-believing professors, not theologians, but historians, admit that Jesus of Nazareth existed. Now, we all may disagree on what he did or whether he was divine or whether he rose from the dead, but you can't find a credible academic out there who says he never existed at all. That's why the article is kind of interesting here. This guy actually is trying to make money on a book that claims something that nobody says.
So what you're saying is, if he was really, really serious about it, he would say,
I'll eat more than
I'll eat more than
well,
one
at some
page.
point that you probably will be able to come up with a historian
Probably.
who's going to go out on that limb and say, all right, I've changed my vote. Mm-hmm. I'm over here now. And then, you know, how much of your Bible do you want to eat? Really?
Right. Well, that's true.
Seriously. It is God's word, and we're supposed to hide it in our hearts.
And
through our bellies.
Yeah.
Well, there are scenes where, like, Jeremiah eats the scroll of God's word, and it's sweet like honey.
There's that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're onto something. From the Department of Everybody has to write a blog post that gets people's attention with an alarming headline, which seems to be where most news comes from nowadays. You know, Peter Enns? Mm-hmm. You know Peter Enns?
I do not.
Peter Enns is?
I do not.
How would you describe him? He is a biblical scholar. He was considered evangelical.
We could look up his bio.
At one point, he was at, I believe, Westminster Seminary, and he was finally asked to leave because they decided that he really couldn't support the Westminster Confession. That's when
statement of faith.
Yeah, they voted him out.
Peter Enns is a biblical scholar, theologian, and writer. He has written widely on hermeneutics, the relationship between science and religion, Christianity and evolution, and Old Testament interpretation.
Yeah.
But apparently not with the point of view that the Westminster...
Well, he said some things that made the faculty oversight board of his seminary say, we're not sure you actually believe everything in the Westminster Confession. And if that's technically true, you can't teach here. So he moved and went to another seminary. But he also started or college. I don't think he's at a seminary now. He also started blogging for the Huffington Post. 'Cause what else would you do?
It's logical
That's
jump.
what you do.
Sure.
And if you're going to blog for the Huffington Post, you have to attract readers.
You have to be outrageous.
That's why I don't write. I blog for the Huffington Post, but I don't
How
write.
often?
Not very often because I don't know. It's just not very.
Because you don't do stories that will attract readers.
I did
with their
one
craziness.
years ago saying, I forget the title, but it was something like what atheists and evangelicals have in common. That got a lot of people upset.
Okay, well that's good. Why didn't you keep it up? You were on the right track.
It's up there. It's still up there.
No, not keep it up.
Oh.
Keep up the writing things that get
Because
a lot of people upset.
my main audience that I'm trying to go for are not typically the people who read Huffington Post.
But the last thing that you wrote last week in your newsletter, I thought could have been very controversial.
Wait, what?
About how Playboy helped Disney.
Oh yeah, how Playboy saved the Disney Corporation.
Yeah, and it was almost along those same lines.
Oh,
Yeah, so
no.
if you want to know what she's talking about, go subscribe to my free monthly newsletter on my website, skyjatani.com, and
Okay,
you'll get
we're
the
not
back
going to
issues.
say any more about that.
He actually makes a very good point.
You should know. You're like
did-
Mr. Disney
How
historian
did
over.
Playboy help Disney, Sky?
Come on,
really?
tell us.
I'm dying to know.
Do you really want to
You
go on
really
this
should.
tangent? We're talking about Peter Enns here.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. You've taken a position through our partner in Sam and Christian.
Okay.
How did Playboy help Disney?
All right. So.
We'll get back to Peter Enns.
All right. How did,
You have a short reprieve,
I can
Mr.
tell you.
Enns.
I can tell you.
go. Why don't you tell
Okay, it deals with your critics and how your critics can help you
My critics?
critically look at who you are and what you say.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So Walt Disney, of course, bought 47 square miles of land in Central Florida, and his
Yeah.
big plan for that was to create Epcot,
Yeah.
his experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It was an actual city that he was
Right.
going to build.
I know about all this.
You know all this. He dies.
This is old
About
news.
Him appearing in Playboy magazine in a spread.
What?
We didn't say
Tell us.
that.
That was Minnie Mouse. That was in one of her more desperate seasons. Couldn't get work and all. Anyway, so he dies 1966. The managers of the Disney Corporation who take over are like, we think Walt was crazy with this Epcot plan, so we're just going to shelve that, and they build the Magic Kingdom and kind of the normal amusement park stuff.
They didn't know what to do with all that land.
Eventually, Playboy magazine wrote an expose of the Disney company and its leadership, saying that it had lost a sense of imagination and ingenuity that Walt always had, and accused them of. It said something like the plan for Epcot died 3 seconds after Walt did, and they never had any intention of doing any of this stuff. And it was a big public shaming of the Disney Corporation, saying it was going to go down the drain because Walt was gone and they didn't know what they were doing. So publicly, the Walt Disney Company denied it and said, no, we were not, the expose was completely wrong. Behind the scenes, the CEO of Disney was so upset by it that he cobbled together that same week the article came out, a team of people to figure out what, if anything, could be done with Walt's Epcot plan. And of course, eventually they did create Epcot, but it wasn't a city. It ended up being just another amusement park. But anyway, the whole article I wrote was about how you can't get two companies that are more different, Disney and Playboy, even though they both have rodent mascots.
Like Christians and atheists.
And
mice and rabbits.
And Disney, the corporation, could have just completely dismissed Playboy's criticism.
Yeah.
But they actually had to admit the truth of it, at least internally, and it changed their course. And they.
But maybe maybe it was just valid criticism.
It was valid,
nothing
but
to do with who it came from.
yeah, but that's the
Nothing to
point.
do
Is
with
sometimes
Playboy.
we're quick to dismiss criticism because of who it's coming from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to admit when even our enemies are right about their criticism, because we have to be humble enough to accept that God could use somebody who's actually against us for our good.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of criticism coming out about the church or about Christianity or about evangelicals, whatever, and a lot of it is coming from hostile camps
Right.
who don't really seek our
Right.
good. But sometimes we need to be humble enough to listen to the criticism and discern, okay, Lord, is there any truth here that we really do need to hear and repent of and admit is correct? And in the culture war setting that we have, sometimes we just don't even listen to it because
Right.
of who it's coming from.
Do you know how Walt's Epcot really ended?
How?
You want to know?
He died. He died.
The real story.
Let's hear it.
What's the real story,
Phil's got
Phil?
the inside line.
A week after Walt died, Roy, his older brother, who had stayed on to try to he was 71 at the time, 70, I think, was staying on to try to help Walt. The week after Walt died, he went in for the weekly meeting with Mark Davis, who was one of the chief Imagineers, to show him the latest work on the Epcot project. Mark Davis showed him the latest work, said, all right, how do you want to move forward? Roy Disney turned to him and said, Mark, Walt's dead, and walked out of the room. That was the end of Epcot.
Wow.
So it was his brother Roy.
But his brother Roy was the pragmatist. He was.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was the business mind.
If they had actually built what Walt wanted to build, I think it would have been a flaming disaster. I actually think it would have sunk the company.
You're probably right.
I think not building it was the best thing that could have happened to them. That is a whole different topic, though. Is at one point Walt wanted a whole downtown under glass and air conditioned.
Right.
But at the same time, he didn't want anyone to own any property because it was his land. It was all his land.
It's kind of like Dubai.
It was, it was a little bit like
They've basically
Dubai.
built it in the Middle East with oil money.
Yeah, it would have been the only kingdom in America where the serfs couldn't own anything. It would have been he would have been like Lenin in charge of the whole thing. It would have been a disaster. And I think people around that kind of sensed that this is not workable. He will never allow anyone to actually own their own land there.
Behind his back, they mocked him and they called the Epcot plan Waltopia. Like utopia from the Greek meaning no place. Get it? You know,
Yeah.
Waltopia. It's kind of this will never happen was kind of the
Yeah.
thing.
And then there was Autopia, which was the car ride.
Right.
Drive little cars. Drive the cars to no place because you're going around in a circle. That's what the Greeks.
Okay,
that's why Greeks laugh when they go to it.
That's like Carousel of Progress, which I think is the funniest title.
Carousel of Progress,
Because
going
you go
around and
round,
around and
yeah.
around and not going anywhere in the name of progress. That's what's wrong with America today.
Peter Enns.
Peter Enns is going nowhere in the name of progress. So
That's not true.
But Peter Enns has some valid criticism. But he also points out kind of what's wrong with media simply by the existence that you have to have a catchy title, and if it's a list, people click on it. So
true.
he has to come up with a list. Okay, and this is it's kind of depressing a little bit because you have a well-respected theologian who's trying to get a bigger audience, and so he has to play the game, the Huffington Post game.
Not like other, thoughtful people who would never sink so low as to do something
Never!
as
Did you come up
dumb
with a
as
list of a certain number of things?
podcast with a ukulele?
I don't have
with
like 10 ways to play the ukulele.
Are you
So
try-
here's his list. 10 signs you take the Bible too literally. 10
Okay.
signs you take the Bible too literally.
We need the Letterman top 10 music.
10 signs, Bill. Can you hum? Do you have anything? 10. What is the Letterman top 10 music? How's
All
it
right, I'm
go?
going to pull it up.
That's going to take you a half an hour.
Hey.
Forget about that. 10 signs you take the Bible too literally. Number 1, you laugh when you read about dinosaur fossils because you know they're really God's little inside joke to confuse atheists. Number 2, when confronted with a snake, your first impulse is to try to reason with it. To try to reason with it, because the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal, and the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God say you should not eat of the tree? The talking snake. If you believe, so the first message was, if you're a young earth creationist, you take the Bible too literally.
Right.
Okay, offend all those people. Moving on. Now, if you believe there was actually a snake that talked to Adam and Eve, you take the Bible too literally. Did he give a reason for believing that? No. Moving on. Okay, offend all those people. Number 3. Now we really start to get Let's just throw stuff at more people. You buy Ark simulation software so you can know exactly where Noah could have kept all those animals.
Well, I have wondered what they did with all of their poop.
Does that software actually exist?
I don't think so. I think he's making this up.
Who should buy it if it does?
Who?
Is your friend over there?
William Shatner?
No.
Tyler
No,
Perry?
Tyler Perry, because I bet he could make a movie out of that.
About the poop in the Ark?
Right.
That's
I mean,
the
think
name of
about
the
it.
movie.
That's a lot
Tyler
of-
Perry's Poop in the Ark.
That's a lot of poop.
That's a lot of poop. Yeah, well, but you could throw it over.
It's a big ocean.
Well, what's it? Yeah, it just dilutes.
They had hatches all along the side, and
You
the
see
animals
the
just...
poop flotsam and
But
jetsam.
can you imagine cleaning
Bobbing.
that up every morning? I mean, it would take you
All right.
longer
I'm
than
gonna
a
just
day.
keep on going, Christian.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 4. When your teenager acts out and gives you lip, you break out in a cold sweat, fearing that you may have to have him stoned.
Oh, gosh.
Because Deuteronomy 21:18-22 says,
that's bad?
if you have a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father and mother, all the men of the town shall stone him to death. Okay. If you stone your son, you might be taking the Bible too literally, Peter Enns said. Number 5, you have the bumper sticker, the only good Canaanite is a dead Canaanite. Number 6.
I don't think there are any Canaanites left, are there? So they're all dead anyway.
They're all good. When you see a clam bake next door, you hide in your basement fearing God's wrath might spill over into your yard because you're not supposed to eat shellfish.
Right.
Number 7. Are you still with me, everybody? You check prostitute and adulterer on Match.com as qualities for a mate because
Are those even options on Match.com?
Hosea 1 verse 3 says, Jehovah said unto Hosea, go, take unto thee a wife of whoredom and children of whoredom. Where is whoredom? Is that next to Disneyland?
That's Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
There you
Yeah. Number 8.
You guys are awesome.
You take out an eye and limb insurance policy because, well, you never know. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. Don't laugh. People have actually done this. Number 9. Are you laughing?
Not yet.
Good. You seriously consider castration of your opponent as a legitimate option for settling theological disagreements.
Mark Driscoll's tried that, I'm pretty sure.
Galatians, no, his opponents are already castrated. That's
right.
why they're opposing him. Galatians 5:12. I wish those who unsettle you would castrate themselves. Paul said that.
Yeah, this is what I mean. The Bible has a sense of humor that people
Yes,
just
it
overlook
does.
sometimes.
Number 10. This is your last chance to take the Bible too literally. You download the End Times Calculator app that surveys names of every global leader and celebrity to see how their name might add up to 666 and gives odds on who is most likely to be the Antichrist.
Does
Is that a real
exist?
thing?
I don't know.
Let's look it
Is he
up.
making this up?
Look it
We'll
up.
Look that up. Just because everyone so far
get
has
it
been
done
wrong
before the
100% of the
end
time
song.
does not mean we should stop trying to figure out who's going to be the Antichrist, right?
Are we at the end?
That was the 10th one. Okay. I have such a huge problem with this.
Yeah, tell us.
Can I just say
tell
that?
us what your problem
And
is,
it's a
Phil.
categorical problem. It's a categorical
There
problem.
should be 20 things instead of 10?
This isn't about taking the Bible too literally.
Okay.
This is about reading the Bible wrong.
Okay.
If you read the Bible wrong, you come up to wrong conclusions. It's not about taking the Bible literally, it's taking the Bible seriously. And we've talked about this before, and this is something that John Walton hits on a lot, and Skye Jitani hits on a lot with your 10 Commandments. You did it too, 10 Commandments for how to read the Bible.
But I didn't. They're not sound. They're not. Peter Enns knows exactly what he's doing here.
What's he doing?
He's being cute. He knows hermeneutics. He knows that this is just raw meat for red meat
Yeah,
for
but it's not-
for Huffington Post people.
But it's...
That's all it
just
is.
wrong.
And what's at the very end? A link to buy his book.
Yeah, is that how Huffington Post works?
That's pretty much
They're
how it
all
works.
just ads to buy people's
Because
books?
they don't pay their writers, so they have
His
to.
book is The Bible Tells Me So, Why Defending Scripture Has Made Us Unable to Read It. But come on, if you seriously consider castration of your opponent as a legitimate option for settling theological disagreements, that was a hyperbolic statement that Paul made in a specific situation in a specific letter to a specific group. So applying that to yourself wouldn't be taking it literally, it would be taking it wrong,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then most of these things are about taking things wrong. You take out eye and limb insurance policy. You don't understand the use of hyperbolic statements in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking it wrong.
But people really don't do those things.
You check prostitute and adulterer on Match.com as qualities for a mate because God told to Hosea to go and find a wife who was a prostitute.
Which is a perfect example of what John Walton and I have both said repeatedly on the show, which is the Bible was written for us. It wasn't written to
A
us.
statement
That's
to Hosea
exactly.
is not necessarily a command to us.
Are
That's
you
not
sure
about
this
taking
is
it literally.
not a satirical piece?
No, it was Peter Enns.
It's
He's trying to sell
satirical.
his book.
It's satirical.
But it's Huffington Post is full.
Who knows? Who would read this? That's knows
Because
it's satirical.
well,
don't think
from
it's
my
satirical.
brief experience with Huffington Post readers and the comments they have left some of my pieces, they tend to be obviously a more secular group, and they love pouncing on religion. So he throws this up at Huffington Post
So it's
because
red meat.
It's red meat, and the people go, "Oh, look how stupid the Bible is, and look how dumb Christians
Right.
are who think who take it literally." And he's just drumming up that, and then they want to go buy his book because look, I'm going to learn something about how to.
Do you think it's a bait and switch?
But it's just
Like-
wrong.
It is wrong,
Wrong.
but consider the source.
I am. But he knows better. He knows better.
I mean Huffington Post.
He knows. They don't know better.
Right.
Mr. Huff, Miss Huff, Mrs. Huff.
It's
Did she
it's
sold it,
Ariana
right?
Huffington.
Ariana
She
Huffington.
sold it, right? Did she
To
still run
AOL.
To AOL.
it? She sold it to AOL. Does she still run it?
I don't know.
She's
I don't
Greek,
think so.
Right? She's Greek.
She's Greek.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything?
Do you have a Greek accent that
She
could
should
be
be
insulting?
biblically literate because she can read the original language.
I doubt she has.
Do I have a Greek accent?
Yeah.
Good question.
Look who's back! It's Mom.
That's not Greek.
That was from My Big Fat Greek
I
Wedding.
love that film.
When the grandma runs away again and then comes back with the neighbor. And Beth says, she's back again. Look at she's back.
That kind of sounds Jewish. Who's your Jewish
I don't really
character?
have a Greek Zorb. Pa Great.
Pa Great.
Hey, Valerie, I don't know.
I love
look,
Pa
she's
Great.
back. Hi, who knew?
It's got that Yiddish thing going
You
on.
got the Yiddish thing going because it was based on Jackie Mason.
Oh.
Jackie Mason. How was I familiar with Jackie Mason, a Borscht Belt comedian, when I was a child growing up in Iowa?
How?
How? You want to know how?
Yeah.
The Pink Panther show. The Pink Panther cartoon on Saturday morning had a little segment called The Ant and the Aardvark. And the Aardvark was voiced by Jackie Mason.
Huh.
It's like, hey, Ant, where you going? Get back here, Ant. I'm going to get you. Is this Jewish aardvark chasing around this little Gentile ant?
That's
It
hilarious.
was a religious war. And that's how I learned to do my Jewish accent, so that I could bring it to a Christian children's show and disrupt the space-time
That's
continuum.
a great little fun fact.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Now sing as Pa Great.
And I didn't think we had any news today. Who knew? Okay, what did we talk about?
What didn't we talk about, Phil?
We didn't talk about, we did hit the gays and the atheists again.
Yeah, a little bit.
And how to
Not
read
very
the Bible, and Disney, and Playboy,
read the Bi-
and Tyler Perry, and What Would Jesus Do, and what else did we cover?
I am overwhelmed.
There's a lot.
Can you pick one as a launch pad? Pick one. Pick one as a starting point.
Disney and Playboy. Come on.
We
you-
also
you got
talked
the
about
whole-
Romulus and Remus.
Oh, yeah, Romulus
which
and
could
Remus.
relate to Playboy.
Oh boy, Heidi, Heidi, hoy. Did you know that Disney and Playboy are somehow connected in Sky Jatani's head? I think he might be wrong. I'm glad he's not dead, cause he's still thinking pretty well about everything else. And we can help Peter Enns learn to love the mouse when he gives 10 commandments that aren't 10 commandments, and literalness that he just doesn't understand to sell books on Ariana Huffington's Post. That's the way you can make money for toast when you got laid off from your seminary because they decided you were taking the Bible too liberally. And we can help him out if he just watched John Walton on our show. Thank you. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.